Well, thank you for joining us today for our weekly devotional. We're here and spring's in full bloom. So remember, no pollen formed against you shall prosper. That's from 1 Benedrolians 24:7. Now, don't look that up. There is no 1 Benedrolians, and don't go tell your friends that I quoted that Bible verse today. So I got some questions. Anybody had questions in life? I've always had questions, some doubts about things. Here's some of the questions that have always bothered me. Why is that ground meat called hamburger when it's actually made out of beef? Why isn't it beef burger? Don't know. Why doesn't glue stick to the inside of a bottle? Why isn't there mouse-flavored cat food? Seems like a no-brainer to me. If man evolved from monkeys and apes, why do we still have monkeys and apes? Haven't we evolved? When two airplanes almost collide in the air, why do they call it a near miss instead of a near hit? Why do you drive in a parkway and park in a driveway? Doesn't make much sense. If the black box flight recorder is never damaged during a plane crash, why don't we just make the whole airplane out of that material? And then there's the greatest question of all time. Who let the dogs out? I got a couple woofless back there. I see them coming. So you have questions, things you doubt in life. Today's message is benefit of the doubt. In football, the offensive line, we had a slogan, when in doubt, fire out. That was pounded in your head. You see, you get in a huddle and you call a play, and it could be a simple play. Strong right, 28, G sweep on 2. And it's a very simple play. Strong right, tight end goes to the right side of the formation. 28, everybody knows the first number is the person carrying the ball. 2 is the tailback, 1 quarterback, 2 tailback, 3 fullback, 2 going to the 8 hole. Holes are numbered, 2, 4, 6, 8 to the right, 1, 3, 5, 7 left. So the number tells you who's getting the ball and what hole they're going to. G sweep means the guard's going to pull. That's a simple one. So you break that huddle, and something happens in that 7-yard jog to the line of scrimmage. There's a lot going on in your head. You get up to the line of scrimmage, you settle in your stance, and the defense starts moving. And your brain starts calculating. The linebacker starts shouting out formations and defensive alignments. And you start wondering, does this dude even know our own plays? And then the defensive tackle right in front of you starts telling you things about your mama you never even heard. And while this is all going on, the quarterback has started a cadence, and you're trying to remember, was it on 1 or is it on 2? And you start having doubts. Linebacker knows the play. Is my mama even who I thought she really was? And you remember your assignment. When in doubt, fire out. Just hit someone. Taking some action is better than taking no action. Have you ever doubted yourself? The decision you made? Was that the right decision? Should I have done it that way? Have you ever doubted or questioned God? It's kind of taboo to even ask that or think it, right? What if all this isn't real? Can I believe every story in the Bible? You see, we have to understand, doubt is not unbelief. There's a difference between having doubt and a question and unbelief. Most people are afraid to ask questions, and you're not the only one. A recent survey said only 28% of Americans believe the Bible is the actual Word of God. 28%, that's basically 1 out of 4. So next time you're at a grocery store and you're standing in line, there's 3 other people, there's 4 of you, and you believe in the Bible, you can assume based on the stat the other 3 don't. And that's the odds we're facing in this world. Doubt's important. It builds our faith. It lets us dive deeper and seek more answers to build a stronger foundation. Doubt is mentioned 72 times in the Bible. Recently, Pastor Greg Rochelle Life Church wrote a book called The Benefit of Doubt. And in that book, he makes a statement. Doubts don't make you a bad Christian. They make you human. In Matthew 28:17, Matthew wrote, when they saw him, speaking of Jesus, they worshiped, but some doubted. Now, if you go into context of what's happening in Matthew 28, this is after the crucifixion and resurrection of Christ. He has appeared to the disciples one last time before he's going to ascend to heaven. And he's giving them the Great Commission. He's telling them, you disciples will go into all the world and spread the gospel. You're going to start the Great Commission. But Matthew said when they saw him, they worshiped, but some doubted. They had spent 3 years with him, seeing all the miracles. They had just a few days earlier seen him nailed to a cross and die, and laid into a tomb with a stone sealed with Roman soldiers guarding. And now here he is. Everything he'd been telling them had came true. And they'd seen it with their own eyes. They had lived it. They were there. And yet Matthew said some doubted. And it's important to understand your doubts don't disqualify you. You see, even the ones who doubted were given the same assignment to go share the gospel. Jesus knew if you were doubting this whole thing, what's really going on here? Am I really believing what I'm seeing? And if they doubted in that moment, and Jesus still says, I'm using you to go spread the gospel, then he can use each one of us as well, even in our doubts. So what are you doubting today? What questions do you have? Is Jesus who he said he was? What about all the scientists that are always trying to disqualify God? Does God really love me? Why are my prayers still unanswered? You see, doubts can be driven by your circumstances, what's going on around you in your life. Doubts may be driven by your intellect. You're one of those people that just questions everything. You want to get to the truth, the root cause. Doubts may be driven by emotion, simply how you're feeling in the moment, whether you're happy, sad, mad, whatever it is. Doubts may be driven by other people. Other people say things to you that contradict your beliefs, or they try to convince you to see it their way. Doubts may be driven by decisions. You've made some poor decisions in life. They've led to something, but you're doubting. Understanding the why you have a doubt or questions is the building block for strengthening your faith. You see, God wants you to come to him with all your questions. There was a pastor recently, an older gentleman. He was telling a story when he was a young man in seminary. And when he was in school, his professor was an older guy who obviously was once a young pastor too. And this teacher, when he had started preaching, he had went to southern Louisiana, and electricity was just starting to really explode and become a thing. And he was at a small black rural church, and they had one single light bulb that hung in the middle of the congregation that lit the entire church. That's all they had, was one light bulb. And he's there preaching up a storm, and the light flickers, and the whole room goes dark. And he kind of starts stuttering and pausing on his message because he's in pitch black now. And he's thinking, starting to doubt, do I keep going? Can these people even still, they can't see me, can they even still hear me? And he's starting to have doubt. And an older deacon in the back stood up and yelled, "Preach on, preacher. We can still see Jesus even in the dark." And sometimes we have to remind ourselves that same way. We may be going through a dark period of our life, a down cycle. Maybe we're a little anxious. Maybe we're a little depressed. We have some questions. But we can still see Jesus because we know he's promised to never leave us. In John 16:24, Jesus said, "Until now, You have not asked for anything in my name. Ask and you will receive, and your joy will be complete. You see, in this verse, to set the context, this is during Holy Week, during the time of the Last Supper, and Jesus is gathering his disciples up, and he's trying to tell them what's getting ready to happen. And you see, we sometimes forget the disciples didn't have a Bible. They didn't have study guides. They were living history in the moment. And they didn't have to ask questions to prayer, to ask and go to God, because if they had a question, if they had a doubt, they just had to ask Jesus. He was standing right there with them. They're sitting at a dinner table with them. If they had a question, they could just ask him. What is it, Jesus? What is it tonight? Is it beef or chicken? Well, I got a question. They could just ask him. But he's starting to tell them, I'm not going to be here much longer. And until now, you've never asked for anything in my name. But if you ask, you will receive it. And your questions and your doubts, they'll become complete. So he's telling them what the same thing applies to us today. If you have doubts, if you have questions, take them straight to God in prayer. Ask in the name of Jesus. Why is this illness occurring in my family? Why am I going through a period of depression or job loss or financial struggle? Just seek. Just seek. And keep praying and asking questions. Don't let your doubts come to God. God would rather have you come to him with all the questions and doubts than move away from him. We have a lot of questions. One of the biggest questions I ever hear is, why is there so much suffering in the world? Why all the suffering? Why does God allow it? The answer is because God is love. And you think, well, that doesn't make sense. If God is love, why is he allowing suffering? You see, love is based on free will. God's love is called agape love. It's a love that knows no boundaries and no limits. So when God created Adam and Eve and he put them in the garden, he created a perfect scenario. And they were put there as his master creation to serve, to worship, and just enjoy fellowship with God. And God could have easily prevented Adam and Eve from stumbling, but in doing so, he would have had to force them to love them. And you can't force someone to love you. So God had to give them free will. God loves you regardless, but it's your choice to love him back. You see, as humans, we're limited to conditional love. I love you if you love me. I'll love you if you don't do anything to hurt me or betray me or do me wrong. But if you do, all bets are off, right? I can't love you anymore. But God's not that way. So he gave free will to man to make a decision. But in that free will, we have to remember, if you can choose love, you can also choose hate. You can choose between right and wrong. You can choose between good and evil. Freedom allows us to love, but it also allows us to sin. And that is what brings heartache and suffering into a broken world. But that free will, the very thing that allows those decisions, also allows us to choose to love, to follow, and serve God. Billy Graham said it great. God is more concerned with your soul than he is with your physical body. And that's hard to understand because we think of ourselves in this moment in time, we think life is long and we're going to all be healthy, but life is so short. It's a blip on the timeline of eternity. Bible tells us it's like a vapor. It's just here for a moment and then poof, it disappears. And God's more concerned with your soul because it's eternal. Your body is only temporary. And what happens when you're under physical attack? You have an illness, you're sick, you've been diagnosed with something, or someone your loved one has. You fall on your knees and pray. And you begin to lift your hands in the air and you start to ask questions and pull yourself back closer to God. And God wraps himself around you in his love. Because he's more concerned about what's on the inside than he is in what's going on with you physically. In Paul, 3 times, Paul was chosen by God to take the gospel and to preach it. And yet Paul writes that he had a physical ailment. We're not told what it is. Some theologians think he suffered from anxiety or Great Depression. Some said he had a limp, because the Bible makes him aware that he might be limping. So maybe he had something wrong with a leg or a hip. Some people think maybe he even had a bad stuttering problem, so when he got up to preach the gospel, he struggled. We don't know what it was, but it must have been bad. He said it was a messenger from Satan, a thorn in his flesh. And 3 times he went to God and said, take this away from me. Because if you heal me of this, I can even do what you called me to do better. And God said, no. My grace is sufficient. My grace is all you need. Because God understood that when Paul was suffering, he went to Jesus in prayer. He went and fell on his knees to God. Heal me, help me. It pulled him back closer to God to be truly who God called him to be. If he had cured him, he may not rely on God's healing as much and rely on his own power. God realized that even though he had a weakness, even though he suffered a little, it was to strengthen his faith and keep him closer connected to the one who had called him. In 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 8 through 9, Paul wrote, we are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. So Paul was writing, we are hard-pressed. We feel we have pressures of this world upon us. We have to go through some difficult times. But what does pressure do? When pressure is applied, it squeezes out what's inside of you so the whole world can see it. So when you're under pressure and you're going through difficulty and tough times and the squeeze is on, what's coming out of you? What does the world see? The pressure does not destroy and crush you, but allows the world to see that you're relying on Jesus, the love of God, regardless of what you're going through in life. Jesus warned us we would have trials in this life, pain, depression, being discouraged, but hold on to his promises that he will always be with you every step through all of your trials. In John 16:33, he said, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world. And it goes back to our limitations of our human mind. We only use 20% of our brain. We only see our eyes and ears, the sound waves and the color and the prisms of lights. We only see 20% of what's really around us. We only hear 20% of all the sounds that actually exist. And we're limited. And we think so much of this earthly world and the things and the struggles within it. But Jesus assures us, I've overcome the world. The world's a passing thing. I've secured that because I've got something greater, a kingdom of heaven that lasts for eternity. So focus your faith on Jesus. Don't look to other Christians because we all make mistakes. Other Christians are going to stumble and fall, and we can't judge them. People will fail you, Jesus will not. Don't let a hypocrite at church drive you out of the church. You go to church to worship and serve God. You're not there to serve man, to socialize. You're there just for one purpose and one purpose only. Keep your focus and your faith directly on Jesus. And if you ever feel separated from God, you're not alone. Jesus himself understands that separation. In Matthew 27:46, he cried out on a cross, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Forsaken is to turn around. At that point in time, every sin of the world, past, present, and future, was cast upon him. And God in his holiness cannot be near or look upon sin. So for a brief moment, there was so much sin, the entire sin of humanity was burdened and weighing down on Christ. And the sky turned dark. The temple veil tore. The earth shook. The sun went dark. There were great earthquakes. Things happened. The temple was split in two. For that brief moment, and Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But we know the end of the story. God's perfect plan was put in place. And why did Jesus cry that out? Because he was not the first one to use those words. In Psalms 22:1, David cried out the very same word, my God, why have you forsaken me?" as he was on the run and being pressured in his life. And prophecy said the true Messiah will utter the words of David, which were written 1,000 years before the crucifixion. And to fulfill the prophecy, the final fulfillment, he cried out those exact same words that are in Psalm 22:1 that starts off that song of David. Have you ever given someone else the benefit of the doubt? You ever heard that phrase? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. You see, the benefit of the doubt that you give someone is based upon how well you know them. If I have a lunch appointment with somebody at 12 noon, think about yourself. You go to a lunch appointment and you sit down at 12 noon and the other party's not there. And you may wait 5 minutes. And then 10 minutes later, you're on your third basket of chips and your person's still not there. And if you know that person, and they're always late, right? They're not reliable. You can't depend on them. They're not punctual. 15 minutes afterwards, you're still just sitting there munching on your chips because you know that person is always late. And you give them the benefit of the doubt. However, if the person you're waiting on is somebody that's always on time, they're disciplined, they're never late, they're the one you can count on at all times. At 12:15, you have questions. You have doubt. Where are they? Did they forget? I hope they weren't in a car wreck. You see, your benefit of your doubt, what you think about a situation and somebody else, is based on how well you know that person. So your doubts do not define or dismiss God. Trust God even when it doesn't make sense. Because you know who God is, no matter what you're going through in life, you can rest assured in that benefit of the doubt. Even though I'm struggling, going through something, I know God's got a better plan for me. Plans for a hope and a future. Jeremiah 2:13 says, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." Seek God with all your heart first. And that includes every question and every doubt. How do you get to know someone? You have to spend time with them. You have to sit down with them, and to truly know them, you have to ask a lot of questions, don't you? That's how you get to know somebody. You ask questions. That's how we get to know God even deeper. We go to Him, we sit down with Him, we have conversations, and we ask questions. So wrap it up here. In Matthew 17:20, see if I can find it here. Jesus replied, "Because you have so little faith, truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." So you got to set context of verses, right? Why was he saying this? So at this time, he had sent the disciples out. They were still young and early in their mission. He told them, "Hey, I want you to go out and do some miracles and spread the word, and so people, build our following." And they were new at this, and they probably doubted, "You want us to go out and do miracles? Us? Fishermen, tax collectors, common guys, no education, no training, and you're asking us to go do these things that we've awed and seen you do? And they were out there trying to cast out a strong demon from a demon-possessed man, and they couldn't do it. And Jesus walks up and goes, "Be gone." And he cast out the demon. And the disciples were crushed, all right? I was given an assignment by the boss, and the boss walked up, and I couldn't do it, and the boss walked up and fixed the problem. And they're probably dejected. And I always thought this verse, when I was younger, was Jesus criticizing them? Was he condemning them? You have so little faith. It's like he was scolding them. But then I reread it and I re-looked at it, and it's actually just the opposite. He's actually encouraging them. He knew they were young in their walk. He knew they were young in their faith. He knew they had to be strengthened. So he uses this situation not to scold or condemn them, but to give them hope, to answer their questions of doubt. He says, because you have little faith. He acknowledges that they have faith. And your faith can be as small as a mustard seed, the smallest of all plants. Because you just have a little faith, you know what you can do? You can move a mountain from here to there. He's encouraging them. He's building them up. Don't have doubts. Don't question. You're strengthening your faith. You have a little faith now. But even that little faith can move a mountain. A little faith can move a mountain. So don't doubt any further. Don't doubt the size of your faith. Remember, it's not how small your faith is. It's who you put your faith in. And you put your faith in a God who has unlimited power. So don't doubt the size of your faith, and go move some mountains today. Thanks for spending time with us this morning. We look forward to seeing you next week, which, believe it or not, will be our Easter message. Have a blessed week.